Hello everybody. Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 14th of Jan 2019 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today has been presented on your screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. Now the first article appears in the editorial page number 8. The title of the article is Basic Income Works and Works Well. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3, Economy, under the subsection Indian Economy and Various Issues. Recently, a referendum was carried out in Switzerland. In this particular referendum, the government sought the opinion of the people whether it would want the Swiss government to implement the universal basic income. The universal basic income is basically provision of giving money to all the citizens in a country in order to meet their basic needs. So if you look at the word here, universal basic income, it basically means that the government would be giving money to all the people in the country, that is universal, in order to meet their basic needs. And the universal basic income has basically three fundamental features. The first feature of universal basic income is universal, which means that the money is given by the government irrespective of the socio-economic status of the people. It means that all the people, right from the richest person to the poorest person, would be entitled to get the money in order to meet his basic needs. The second feature of universal basic income is its unconditional nature, which means that when the government transfers the money to its citizens, it does not impose any conditions on the citizens as to how the money has to be utilized for. In other words, the citizen will have complete autonomy or the freedom to utilize the money for whatever purpose he or she deems fit. And the third feature of universal basic income is the agency, which means that under the UBI, the government provides for direct cash transfer to the bank accounts of its citizens. So when the referendum was carried out in Switzerland, the Swiss government sought the opinion of the people whether it would want the government to give the 2000 Swiss francs per month to all its citizens. However, the results of this particular referendum was quite surprising because overwhelmingly people in Switzerland voted against the concept of the universal basic income. In spite of this particular rejection, the idea of universal basic income has caught the imagination of the world, wherein some of the countries are trying to implement universal basic income on an experimental basis. Some of these countries are Canada, Finland, Netherlands, etc. It is in this particular regard, this particular article highlights that even India has to go for the implementation of universal basic income. It believes that India has the necessary technological capability as well as the necessary financial resources in order to implement the universal basic income. The article here argues that implementation of universal basic income would take forward the idea of a progressive welfare state. An expected UPSC mains question from this particular article could be discuss the pros and cons of implementation of universal basic income in India. Hence, as part of this video analysis, we shall basically discuss on the pros and cons of implementation of universal basic income in India. Let us now first understand the pros of universal basic income in India. Firstly, the implementation of universal basic income would lead to a social justice in India. This becomes extremely important because it was Mahatma Gandhi ji who once said that a nation's greatness is measured by how well it treats its weakest members. Hence, in this regard, implementation of universal basic income would take forward the idea of a progressive welfare state, wherein through the implementation of universal basic income, the state would be showcasing its commitment to lift the vulnerable sections of the Indian society out of poverty. Secondly, we have to note here that in a progressive welfare state, it becomes a duty of the state in order to provide for the basic needs of the people. The second benefit of universal basic income is that the implementation of universal basic income would lead to the poverty reduction in India. This is because if you look at the BPL list in India, the BPL list is usually characterized by inclusion and exclusion errors. What this means is a large number of people who are not actually BPL have got included in this particular list because of the mistakes. Similarly, a large number of people who are supposed to be in this particular list have not got included, leading to both inclusion as well as exclusion errors. Hence, one of the biggest challenge has been with respect to identification of the BPL population in India. Apart from that, there is also difference of opinion among the economists with respect to the criteria for the identification of BPL population, wherein different committees such as the Tendulkar Committee or the Rangarajan Committee have come up with different estimates related to BPL population in India. Now, all these things clearly highlight that we have been unable to identify the BPL population in India. And if you don't identify the BPL population, automatically the benefits of the government will not be able to reach this section of the Indian society. Hence, the implementation of universal basic income would ensure that the people belonging to BPL section of the Indian society are able to get the benefit from the government in order to meet their basic needs. Apart from that, if you look at the BPL population in India, it has got reduced from almost 70% in 1950s to 22% in the year 2011-12. In spite of this drastic reduction in the BPL population, a large section of Indian society even today is unable to meet its basic needs. It is in this regard the economic survey had suggested that we need to wipe out every tear from every eye. So it is because of these two reasons the implementation of universal basic income would lead to the poverty reduction. The third advantage of universal basic income can be attributed to the fact that the universal basic income would be transferred directly to the beneficiary account, wherein it will provide autonomy or the freedom to the citizens in order to utilize the money for whatever reasons they deem fit. And this becomes extremely important because the reasons for poverty in India vary from a family to a family. For example, in one particular family, the reason for poverty could be lack of education. On the other hand, in another family, the reason for poverty could be lack of employment opportunities. So, if you transfer the money directly to the family is in a best position to take a decision with respect to how to utilize the money in order to come out of the poverty. Hence, it is in this regard the universal basic income can be considered as the best tool for eradicating the poverty in India. The fourth benefit of universal basic income is that it would lead to improvement in the administrative efficiency. This is because presently there are huge leakages in the subsidy regime of the government, wherein most of the subsidies are not reaching the BPL section of the Indian society. Apart from that, one can also see a lack of transparency and corruption in the administrative setup. Hence, by using the trinity of JAM, that is Jandan, Aadhaar, and Mobile, we would be able to drastically improve the administrative efficiency to the implementation of the universal basic income. In spite of these advantages associated with the implementation of universal basic income in India, its implementation would face multiple challenges. For example, we can raise a very pertinent question as to whether India has sufficient amount of financial resources in order to implement the universal basic income. If the government has to provide for basic income to the people, the government would be required to transfer rupees 1090 per month per person to all the citizens. This is as per the Suresh Tendulkar committee recommendations. And transferring this much amount of money every month to its citizens would require almost around 12.5% of its GDP. However, if you look at the government's present expenditure on subsidies, it is around 4.24%. So the question here is, how would the government be able to raise the sufficient amount of money in order to implement the universal basic income? Further, it is to be noted that the fiscal deficit of the government is already very high. So the implementation of universal basic income would further constrain the government finances. The second concern with respect to universal basic income is that will it be politically feasible for the government of the day to implement the universal basic income? This is because if the government has to implement the universal basic income, the government would be required to do away with all the subsidies. And doing away with the subsidies would be considered to be a politically bad move for any government of the day. Hence, it is in this regard, it is being said that the implementation of universal basic income is politically infeasible. The third concern which can be raised with respect to UBI is with respect to social cost. Some of the economists have argued that if people are getting money free of cost, then people would not have any incentive to work. Hence, the universal basic income would induce laziness among the citizens. Apart from that, if people are getting universal basic income, then there is a probability that a people's expenditure on certain temptation goods such as alcohol, cigarettes, and gambling may actually increase. So, since the universal basic income is given to the people without any conditionalities, People may in turn spend the money for temptation goods rather than for any productive purposes. So, as you can see here, the universal basic income has both pros as well as cons. And because of the pros and cons associated with the universal basic income, the economic survey has stated that even though the time may not be ripe for India for the implementation of universal basic income, the time is ripe to have a serious discussion with respect to implementation of UBI in India. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know with respect to this particular article. Apart from that, based upon our discussion, you can try writing answer to this expected UPSC mains question. Thus, having analyzed all the aspects related to this particular article, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears as a lead article on page number 8. The title of the article is A Way Out of the Morass. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2, International Relations, under the subsection India and its Neighborhood. Before analyzing this particular article, let us first look into its background. This article has appeared in the newspaper because recently the US President Mr. Donald Trump has announced his decision to reduce the American troop strength in Afghanistan by half. It is in this particular regard, various stakeholders have made calculated efforts to place themselves in a favorable position in Afghanistan after the withdrawal of US troops. For example, countries such as Russia, China, Iran, and even USA have been engaging in direct talks with the Taliban. For example, the Russian government has recently initiated the Moscow format in order to provide for a platform for the direct engagement with the Taliban. More importantly, even Iran, which is a Shia regime, has established official dialogue with Taliban, which is considered to be a staunchly Sunni movement. So all the stakeholders are trying to place themselves in a favorable position, which clearly shows that there is a geopolitical shift which is presently taking place in Afghanistan. So because of this geopolitical shift, there is a need for India to also protect its own interest. So because of the need for India to protect its own interest, this particular article has given certain suggestions with respect to India's foreign policy towards Afghanistan. In this regard, the article here has given mainly three suggestions. The first suggestion here is that the Indian government should engage with the talks with Taliban. Second is to ensure the geopolitical neutrality of Afghanistan. And the third one is to establish a regional compact. Hence, as part of this video analysis, we will emphasize on these three aspects of the article one by one, starting with the engagement with the Taliban. As you all know, India has refrained from establishing the formal contacts with the Taliban. It is in this regard, this article highlights that India has to give up this particular policy and instead engage in direct talks with Taliban. This is on account of multiple reasons. Firstly, Taliban will be a major player in the politics of Afghanistan in the coming months as well as years, and they already control more than 50% of the country. Apart from the growing influence of Taliban has also been gaining legitimacy in the Afghanistan. This is because some of the countries such as Russia, China, US and even Iran have been engaging in the direct talks with Taliban. Hence, India's refusal to have talks with Taliban would end up alienating the Taliban. Hence, because of these reasons, the article has suggested that India has to give up this policy of refraining in bilateral talks with the Taliban, and India should engage in talks with the Taliban. The second option before India is to establish a regional agreement wherein the regional powers such as India, China, Russia, US, Pakistan, etc. have to come together in order to commit themselves that they would not be interfering in the Afghanistan's internal matters. This is because some of the countries such as Pakistan have been treating Afghanistan as their own backyard in order to promote their vested interest. And this is making the security situation in Afghanistan more fragile. Hence, India as a regional power can leverage Chinese influence in controlling Pakistan. This article has highlighted that India has to take a lead in order to have a regional agreement for non-interference in Afghanistan's internal matters. The next option before India, which has been highlighted in this particular article, is with respect to geopolitical neutrality. Now, this geopolitical neutrality would mean mainly two things. The Afghans must themselves declare that they would maintain strict neutrality with respect to their relation with the external powers, which means to say they would not allow any external power to gain a strategic edge in the Afghan politics. The second aspect of the geopolitical neutrality is that all the regional powers have to give a declaration that they will not interfere in the internal affairs of Afghanistan. The author of this particular article highlights that this geopolitical neutrality of Afghanistan can be based on the Neutrality of Laos Agreement, which was signed among the 14 countries, including India, in the year 1962. This particular Neutrality of Laos Agreement was based upon ensuring neutrality between the pro-American and pro-communist forces in Laos. So, as part of this Neutrality of Laos Agreement, the countries decided to refrain from interference in the internal affairs of Laos. Further, they also refrained from drawing Laos into any kind of military alliance or to establish the military bases in the Laotian territory. Hence, the idea behind the Neutrality of Laos Agreement was to ensure the neutrality of Laos as well as the neutrality of the external powers. However, it is to be noted that the Neutrality of Laos Agreement was immediately violated by US through its secret war. In spite of these options before India with respect to its Afghanistan policy, this article has also raised certain concerns. For example, presently Pakistan and Afghanistan have signed the Principles of Mutual Relations in the year 1988. This particular agreement is based upon the principle of non-interference and non-intervention in each other's matters. However, history has shown that Pakistan has been treating Afghanistan as its backyard and it has not respected this particular agreement. Similarly, even the neutrality of Laos agreement was violated by US. Hence, all this clearly highlight that the international agreements on neutrality have not proved to be effective in ensuring the geopolitical neutrality. So these are some of the important aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, this would be a mains question for your practice. The question here is, in the light of imminent US withdrawal from Afghanistan, examine various options before India. Do you think it is feasible to have an international agreement to maintain the geopolitical neutrality of Afghanistan? Now you can try writing answer to this question by going through our video analysis. With this, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 11. The title of the article is India for Afghan-led peace talks. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2, International Relations, under the subsection India and its neighborhood. Further, this article is also important because in UPSC Mains 2018, a rated question on Central Asia has already been asked. This article has appeared in the newspaper in the context of the first meeting of the India-Central Asia dialogue which took place in Uzbekistan recently. Now, during this first meeting between India and Central Asian countries, both the sides highlighted the need to take forward their multifaceted relationship. Hence, as part of this video analysis, let us first understand the nature of India's interaction with the Central Asian countries. So, if you look at the Central Asian countries, these countries are Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Now, these five Central Asian countries are actually landlocked countries. And one main problem with respect to India's interaction with the Central Asian countries is lack of direct connectivity between India and the Central Asian countries. It is in this particular regard, Afghanistan is actually considered to be a land bridge to the Central Asian countries, and it is a link between the Central Asian countries and the South Asian countries. Since lack of direct connectivity between India and Central Asian countries is a major hindrance for the development of their relationship, India has unveiled the Connect Central Asia policy in the year 2012. The main idea behind this particular policy is to augment the linkages between India and the Central Asian countries. Hence, as part of its Connect Central Asia policy, the Indian government has signed the Ashgabat Agreement in 2018. It is to be noted that the Ashgabat Agreement provides for an international multimodal transit and transport corridor between Central Asia and the Persian Gulf. As you can see in this particular diagram here, the Ashgabat Agreement aims to establish a linkage in the entire Eurasian region. Apart from that, this particular agreement also seeks to establish linkages with the regional corridors such as the International North-South Transport Corridor. And as you can clearly see here, the International North-South Transport Corridor and the corridor under the Ashgabat Agreement are set to meet at Tehran. Hence, as we have discussed, India has signed this particular agreement in the year 2018. So, through the signing of this particular agreement, India would be able to establish linkages with all the Eurasian countries, including the Central Asian countries. Apart from that, India is also engaging with the Central Asian countries through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It is to be noted that recently in 2017, India has become a full fledged member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Hence, India's membership of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is expected to give a further fillip to their relationship. Let us now understand the opportunities and challenges with respect to India's engagement with the Central Asian countries. Ensuring energy security for India is one of the foreign policy's main objective. It is in this particular regard the Central Asian countries can provide an answer to India's energy security problem. This is because the Central Asian countries are well endowed with uranium, natural gas, as well as the oil reserves. However, in spite of this opportunity posed by the Central Asian countries, India has been unable to make an optimum use of this particular opportunity due to the hindrance of Pakistan, wherein Pakistan has not provided full fledged support for the implementation of the TAPI pipeline. So, because of the delay in the implementation of the TAPI pipeline, India has not been able to make an optimum use of the vast natural resources of the Central Asian countries. The second opportunity can be seen in terms of the bilateral trade between India and Central Asian countries, wherein there is ample amount of scope to enhance the trade relations. This is because the Central Asian countries can emerge as a major market for Indian goods such as the pharmaceuticals. Apart from that, the Central Asian countries can also emerge as a market for the Indian services such as the education as well as the IT and IT enabled services. In spite of this opportunity to increase the trade relationship, one major challenge before this is lack of connectivity between India and Central Asian countries. Hence, lack of direct connectivity between India and Central Asia has proved to be a major hindrance for the development of trade relationship between India and Central Asia. The third aspect is the China factor. Now, the Central Asian countries have become important stakeholders of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. Now, this poses two problems before India. Firstly, India has to play a second fiddle to China with respect to its engagement with the Central Asian countries. And secondly, the Central Asian countries may not be in a position to criticize the Chinese policies against India. The next set of opportunities and challenges can be seen with respect to their defense relationship. The opportunity here lies in the fact that India's military base has been located in Tajikistan. However, the challenge is that India's defense relationship have not expanded to their full potential. So these are some of the opportunities and challenges for India with respect to its engagement with the Central Asian countries. So based upon the discussion which we had so far, our expected UPSC mains question for your practice would be: discuss the opportunities and challenges before India with respect to its engagement with the Central Asian countries. Now you can try writing answer to this question by going through our video analysis. With this, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 13 of the business section of the Hindu newspaper. The title of the article is Panel Pulls Up the Government for Diverting Coal Cess. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3, Economy, under the subsection Indian Economy and Various Issues. Before understanding this particular article, let us first understand its background. Now, in the year 2010-11, the Government of India had introduced coal cess, wherein the coal cess is presently collected at the rate of rupees 400 per ton of coal extracted, which means that all the coal extracting companies such as the Coal India Limited are required to pay coal cess for every ton of coal which they extract, and the proceeds of this coal cess goes into a separate fund known as the National Clean Energy Fund. One important aspect which one should know with respect to National Clean Energy Fund is that it is maintained outside the Consolidated Fund of India in the public account of India. And secondly, the National Clean Energy Fund is a non-lapsable fund, which means that the money in the National Clean Energy Fund does not lapse when the financial year ends. Rather, the money gets continued to the next financial year. And as the name suggests, the National Clean Energy Fund is basically used for funding various clean energy projects. And the decision as to which clean energy projects would be funded under the National Clean Energy Fund, this decision is taken by an interministerial panel which is headed by the Finance Secretary. Now, this particular article here has highlighted that whatever money the government has collected under the coal cess, instead of using the money for funding the clean energy projects, the government has diverted the coal cess to compensate the states for the shortfall in the GST revenue. And because of the diversion of the coal cess which is presently taking place, the gas-based power plants in India are facing shortage of funds. And because of this, the gas-based power plants are operating below their installed capacity. In this regard, the article here highlights that instead of diverting the coal cess to compensate the state for the shortfall in the GST revenue, the government should instead use the coal cess in order to provide funds to the gas-based power plants. So these are some of the important aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. Based upon our discussion, this would be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to the National Clean Energy Fund. The first statement is, it is funded through the proceeds of coal cess and the road and infrastructure cess. It is to be noted here that the road and infrastructure cess, it is a tax imposed on the sale of petrol and diesel, and the cess collected through the road and infrastructure cess goes into a separate fund known as the Central Road Fund and not into the National Clean Energy Fund. Hence, this particular statement here is wrong. The second statement reads as, it is maintained under the Consolidated Fund of India. Now, as we have discussed, the National Clean Energy Fund is maintained under the Public Account of India and not under the Consolidated Fund of India. Hence, even this particular statement here is wrong. So, looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is D. That is neither 1 nor 2. Thus, having analyzed all the aspects related to this particular article, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 13. The title of the article is RBI warns of the NPS spike in MUDRA loans. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Economy under the subsection Indian Economy and Various Issues. Further, this article is also important because in Prelims 2016, a question on Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana has already been asked. Now, this particular article has appeared in the newspaper because over a period of time, the amount of loans given by the banks for the Mudra loans has increased. However, the RBI has now warned that the Mudra loans could see a spike in the non-performing assets. Hence, as part of this video analysis, firstly we'll understand about the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana and why there could be increase in the NPS of the Mudra loans. Access to cheap credit is one of the biggest constraints which the MSMEs in India are presently facing. It is in this regard, the Government of India has launched the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana in the year 2015. As part of this particular Yojana, all the banks in India, including the cooperative banks, the regional rural banks, the private banks, the foreign banks, are required to give up to rupees 10 lakh of loans to the micro, small and medium enterprises. Hence, this particular scheme has been introduced by the government in order to provide for assured credit to the micro, small and medium enterprises. Apart from that, the government has established an agency known as Micro Units Development and Refinance Agency, and as the name suggests, this particular agency provides for the refinance facilities to the banks which have given the loans to the micro, small and medium enterprises. Now, this particular scheme has seen a huge success, which is evident in the fact that so far the banks in India have totally disbursed around 6 lakh crores of Mudra loans, and this has benefited almost around 12 crore beneficiaries. However, in spite of this success associated with the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, the RBI has warned that the scheme might turn out to be the next source of NPS. Now, this particular warning was also issued by the ex-RBI Governor, Mr. Raghuram Rajan. Hence, in this regard, let us understand as to why the Mudra Yojana might emerge to be the next source of NPA problems. The first problem here is that the banks have not followed due diligence in giving away the Mudra loans. This is because over a period of time, the banks in India have developed a culture of meeting the credit targets. And in order to meet these targets, the banks have given away loans without ascertaining the credit worthiness of the borrowers. And because of this particular problem of not following the due diligence, it is expected that the Mudra loans could become non-performing assets in future. The second problem is with respect to the repayment challenge. Now, what this means is, most of the time, the loans given by the banks as Mudra loans happen to be unsecured loans. Unsecured here means these loans have been given without any collateral, thus making the Mudra loans much more riskier as compared to the normal loans. And the second problem with respect to repayment here is that most of the time, the banks in India have focused on recovering the larger loans rather than on recovering the Mudra loans. For example, the bank staff may go after one loan with an outstanding loan of rupees 10 lakh instead of recovering 10 different loans of rupees 1 lakh each. However, if you look at the total amount of credit dispersed under the Mudra loans, it is actually around 6 lakh crores. So far banks have not focused on recovering the Mudra loans and they are focused only on recovering the larger loans. So it is expected that over a period of time, the non-performing assets of the Indian banks would increase because banks have emphasized less on recovering the Mudra loans. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, this would be a prelims question for your practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana. The first statement reads as, it provides for loans to the small entrepreneurs in order to bring them within the formal credit system. As we have discussed, this particular statement here is correct. The second statement reads as, under Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, the borrowers can directly borrow money from the Mudra agency. Now this particular statement here is wrong because as we have discussed, the Mudra agency acts as a refinancing facility for the banks and the consumers or the borrowers are not allowed to borrow money directly from the Mudra agency. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is A, that is one only. Thus, having analyzed all the aspects related to this particular article, let us now move to the next article. Now the next article appears on page number 5. The title of the article is, it is not a nod for Mekedatu. This article has appeared in the newspaper because the central government has recently informed the Supreme Court that it has given the permission to the government of Karnataka for preparing the detailed project report on the Mekedatu project. However, it has not given the go ahead or the green signal for the actual construction of the Mekedatu project. Now, if you look at the Mekedatu project, this is a proposed project of the Karnataka government on the river Kaveri. And this particular project is disputed by the government of Tamil Nadu. Now, the various aspects of the Mekedatu project and the nature of dispute between the Karnataka government and the Tamil Nadu government have been comprehensively covered in our DNS dated 13th of December 2018. So please go through this particular DNS in order to know various facets of the Mekedatu project. Now the next article appears on page number 5. The title of the article is Kite Festival Turns the Sky into Canvas. This article shall be important from the perspective of prelims under the subsection Current Events of National Importance. This particular article has appeared in the newspaper because recently India has inaugurated the 4th edition of the International Kite Festival. So with respect to your upcoming prelims, what you are required to note here is that this particular International Kite Festival was inaugurated in Secunderabad, and secondly, the Kite Festival is celebrated as part of the Makar Sankranti celebrations. With this, we have come to end of today's discussion. Now let us look at the question for the day.